Okay, creating a budget isn't all. That doesn't, once the budget is submitted and signed, that does not end the legislature's responsibility in terms of the budget. It's very important that the legislature has the ability to monitor what's happening in the spending side. So the executive in most states is charged with monitoring the revenue and outlays to ensure balance. So the executive is actually tasked with doing that. They have a requirement that they monitor the budget, but the state legislature also wants to have that oversight. Um, and part of the way they have the oversight is to rely on the data produced by the executive. In 32 states, they require agencies to submit on a usually quarterly basis what it is that they've spent the money on, and that way you can see any flags that have been raised without waiting for an entire budget cycle. In 31 states, the agencies only get money in on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis rather than getting the entire pot at the beginning of the year. Um, Also, the executive has the ability to shift around funds within limits in many states. Now, this is something that is much, much more limited at the federal level, which is why it became such a scandal when President Donald Trump took money out of certain parts of the defense budget in order to build the wall, because you're not at the federal level, you're really not supposed to shift those funds. Whereas at the state level, many of our governors have the ability to shift funds, and the type of shifting they can do varies from state to state. In 15 states, they can shift funds from department to department. And so, if the teachers of the state go on strike and mid budget cycle, the governor needs to raise salaries 4%. They can the In 15 states they can move money over from Health and Human Services, for instance. In 31 states, they can transfer funds between programs within a department. And so you in the Department of Transportation, you've got multiple departments. You've got the highway patrol, you've got the road building, you've got the road maintenance, all of those things. And in these states, you can shift money between between the sub agencies of departments, but not between not between department level things itself. So you could in theory in these states shift money from repairing roads to building roads, but you couldn't shift money from repairing roads to schools. And then in 28 states, you can transfer funds between spending categories. So if the highway patrol has money allocated for salaries, money allocated for benefits, and the benefits, for instance, need to rise because the investment fund didn't do what you thought for pensions, or the health insurance raised the cost of health insurance more than you anticipated. You could make up for that within that by doing a hiring freeze so that your total salary budget went down. But you cannot transfer money from the highway patrol to building new roads, because that's a that is the an issue, because you can only change between categories within a sub department. So those are the kinds of things that the legislature does in terms of looking at how the money is outlaid, how much flexibility the executive has to monitor those outlays. But the legislature kind of has a little bit more of a longer term role as well. In 40 states, in the vast majority of our states, the legislature requires performance measures as part of an agency's budget review. And so the legislature wants to know how many road miles of roads did you produce? How many how did the state schools improve? And those performance measures are tied into the budget process. Many states, 22 states, have a separate budget office that is designed specifically to monitor the executive. And so, in that respect, they're not relying just on the numbers provided by the executive and just accepting them. They have a budget agency that is tasked with looking at how that budget is spent on an ongoing basis. 22 states require performance measure reports to the legislature. So most of the states require that the agencies and departments provide performance reports. But in 18 of those states, it is to the executive, and then the executive reports on all of that to the legislature. In 22 states, the agencies have to provide a report directly to the legislature. Um, and it is important to remember that the legislature has ultimate oversight authority and ultimate budget authority. And so, even though it would seem that the executive has the upper hand in all of these things because they're the ones spending the money, monitoring the money, creating the initial budgets, the legislature has ultimate authority in doing all of in writing the law and monitoring how it's carried out. Now, legislatures in general around the country, including our federal legislature, have become less powerful and less able to do this. But statutorily, they still have ultimate oversight authority, and they have a definite role to play in monitoring how the state spends its money.